and it's about the 10 principles to improve dataset discoverability. And here's the DOI going to the Sonodo page, and that's the co-chairs. So basically, the motivation behind the whole interest group is to cover the F of the fair data principles. So that means to make data findable, and especially we are talking here in that document about metadata that is registered to be indexed in searchable resource. And if it's searchable, then you can also, it's a requirement for discoverability. So that's the motivation behind the whole thing. So the group also covers a little bit of the other apps here, but that's an interesting one. So basically the setup is like that. You have users doing discovery, and you have something like a discovery service. It might be inside the data center. So in the data catalog can have a data discovery service, but it can also have some external service like Google Dataset search or one of those portals, Geos or whatever, that are providing the metadata for search. And the back end is the data catalog, and then there are the data providers and curators, which are taking care of metadata records inserted in the data catalog. And the recommendations here is for all of those parties here to improve the discoverability for the users on the left side, to make metadata better and all that. So basically, the progress here was the group kickoff was in 2016 on the plenary 8. And in around 21, 22, there was a discussion about a document, how to conclude about everything, how to make the data discovery for all those parties easier. And at the beginning, it was called 10 Simple Rules, but the name changed a little bit over the time. So at the end, it's now the 10 Principles in 2024. So in the last plenary, we did somehow we presented the last version of that, and we had some final review of the group attendees. And then in 2024, we were finalizing the whole thing and published it in summer on the webpage, and then it was up to you for the review. This is the official citation. So there are the group chairs in it, and also Felicitas Löffler, because she did a lot of work on that document. So she's also in the front, and here's the homepage of it. So basically, the abstract is just more or less copied from the webpage. As said before, it's mostly about enhancing the discoverability of data from the perspective of data searchers and data users. And it's including both human users, but also machine-based systems. That's important. The 10 principles is the output, and it's applicable for a large spectrum of communities. So, but what it is about? So the 10 principles is grouped in those principles, and each of those principles have 1 to 5 or 6 recommendations, which can be done by the data center or whatever system is implementing that principle. So the first thing is know your user. This is so you should know what the user is doing on your data portal in your data center. So there should be surveys, interviews. You should do log analysis, how the search engine is used, possibly A/B testing, and of course, real observation of what the users are doing. Then the second principle that's very important, especially for data centers, is improve the presence in web search. So that's all next to, of course, standard things like search engine optimization. Everybody knows about that, but it's also other recommendations to have APIs for searching and harvesting, so anybody can interact with the metadata in your repository. The P3 is also very important to be present in the literature search. So this is really important that your data is really cited. So you have links to the data in the citation bibliographies of your papers. And in that case, there should be downloadable data citations, link metadata to publications and related search output. And you should engage your communities proactively to include that. Then there should be support for both disciplinary and interdisciplinary search. So it depends. Your metadata should be in a way that both can correctly interpret the metadata and use it for those purposes. That's a lot of recommendations here. So one thing is, of course, provide machine readable metadata with all the links between the different levels, also to other communities and all that. Support for data search from broad term to narrow terms. That's especially interesting for those people doing the search engine itself. So my background is Elasticsearch, Lucene, Zola, full text searches. There's something, so you should, if you have very, very detailed metadata, there should still be the possibility to find those data sets if you just enter some more common words, and are not familiar to all those very specific terms which are provided in the metadata. Of course, duplication is an issue where the data center should work on. But also, if you're creating something like a data portal, you should, of course, not harvest multiple data centers or aggregators of metadata, and then you have to identify. And for that, it's very important to have POIs or persistent identifiers on the metadata, and they should be noted in the metadata. There should also be links to the metadata on different granular levels. That does not only focus on different levels of data granularity, like collections of data sets together. So there's also relationships to the complex citations data group. But also, for example, that the different granular levels on variables used in the metadata should be clearly noted, so it's discoverable and users can have hierarchical access to that information, possibly, for example, doing faceted search and all that information. Then, of course, you should consider the user's metadata needs seen from the user's perspective. So it depends on the type of repository. So if you are a more broad repository, then you have different metadata requirements. But if you have a disciplinary repository, of course, you should really focus on your users. And for example, if you're harvesting other data centers to create something like a portal, you should try to invest work like using AI to add additional information to the metadata, which is very, very general to help your users discovering the data in your portal. That's something. Then, of course, the general, you always have to write that somehow, somewhere, is to improve metadata quality by using, for example, community updated vocabularies and all that. You should use validation tools to detect syntax errors. The evaluation of the fairness is important. So if the machine readable metadata is there, you should use one of those fair checkers to check that. And of course, the latest one, the latest principle is number 10 is to use persistent identifiers wherever possible to allow to use the linked data approach in general. So that's And if you are looking through the document, you will find for each of those recommendations behind those 10 principles, you will find also useful information how some of the data centers participating in that output are implementing that. There are also some links to software and data in that case. So it should be a really useful document if you're setting up a data repository, data search engine, and so on. So I'm just, for the completeness, I'm also bringing here the most important things of the impact statement of the output. The 10 principles is mostly about developing and improving the usability and efficiency of data discovery services. And mainly it's there to ensure that the metadata in those repositories is according to the FAIR principles. And it's the impact is enhanced user data discovery experience, maximizing the value of the efforts in collecting, curating, and disseminating research data. So that's the most out of that one. And the sustainable development goals for that is that the 10 principles are there to especially help, for example, to better manage resources, plan sustainable cities or communities, or, for example, zero hunger attack. Because whenever you improve the possibilities to discover the data, it's easier for those groups doing that type of research or work to get better data, to get the data in a more homogeneous way and easier to access that data. So basically, this is why we listed those points here mainly in the Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, the list of selectable items, there's a little bit limited. So theoretically, you could click all of them. So we choose the best ones for that report. So basically, I'm still in time. It looks like that's all. If you have any questions, you can ask it. So I'm giving back to Shelley.
Thank you. I also have a question. So if you could all raise your hands, I'm sure others do too. Uwe, this is very exciting. And what I really appreciate about this is it's not obvious to everyone what the user experience should be and what the repositories need to provide. So having this list is actually, very elucidatory and helpful. And thank you. And I like how you also pulled in the robust metadata in a way that makes sense for discovery. So that was really nice. My question is, I run into a number of researchers that use repositories that do not support English. And this is a huge frustration, but yet those repositories might very well have a robust management of the data. Can you talk about, like, for instance, I'll say, sometimes you just have to accept it because that's where the data is and data are. And but it's not just that the screens can be read in more than one language, but the search has to also be in more than one language. Can you talk to that a little bit? And if your team considered that?
I think it was also in the discussion. The problem is if you don't have all those languages available in the original metadata, you can, of course, machine translate that stuff and then fed the search engine with it. But so for discovery purposes, this might be enough, but you should never display those auto-translated text to the end user, and that makes it hard because then the user gets some search results which are somehow coming from the machine-generated code. I think what's much more important is one of the things, if you're using terminologies or, controlled vocabularies to describe your data, then it's easier possible to find those data sets using, for example, faceted search. But still, something like full text search is very, very hard to do. So there are already some limitations. But I fully agree on that. There is something to do that can help, but search engines can do that, so using machine translated, but it's always a problem of the user interfaces. If you cannot show the user why this is a search result, you can, of course, show the user the machine translated translation in the search portal, which would be something that could be done. So
very good. Yeah, that makes sense. Who else has a question? Thank you, Uwe, for that.
Yeah.
I like your answer of, hey, if you were using a controlled vocabulary, this is not an issue. I like that a lot. I think I might use that quote from you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question for Uwe? So is this a recommendation that's still open for review, or is this finalized?
Which one? So we are finally, we got some feedback after the end, and we included that already. So it was updated, but basically it's finalized. So there's there will be no updates anymore.
Okay,
so
that's fine, no problem.
Yeah.
Christine,
I think, Bridget, you updated the PDF after our changes. Did you? Or I don't remember how that worked, but I think it should be the up-to-date version now.
Yeah, I actually think I'm waiting for the updated version, but we'll take that offline, Uwe.
Okay.
All right. Christine, please go ahead.
Hi, Uwe. Thank you very much for that. I was wondering if you talked at all about data visualization tools as part of the data exploration process. Is data exploration part of the discovery process in terms of, okay, I found some data, now is it appropriate for my research?
That's part of it. It's also that part of the disciplinary recommendations. I don't exactly know at which place, but there is something like alternative ways to access the data except the plain classic search is also some recommendations, but this is very community specific because for a generalist repository, it's very, very hard to implement that.
Okay, thank you.